I want to thank my Nationals colleagues for the very hard work that we've undergone to speak to those in our communities, to understand what it is on the ground that Indigenous Australians are looking for, and it is not more division in this country. We are part of a liberal, democratic Australia, and one of our fundamental principles is that we are all regarded as equal under the law, despite race, despite gender, despite anything else. And why should I, as an Indigenous Australian, be governed under a separate entity than the rest of Australia because of my race? I've spoken to people throughout communities in the Northern Territory, those whose first language is not English, who don't understand a thing about what this voice proposal is about, who are living their day to day, worrying about how they're not going to encounter violence in their lives, worrying about how they're going to manage their affairs without humbug from their relatives who are dealing with alcohol and substance abuse, worrying about ensuring that their kids are actually going to get to school because now their remote community is overcome with alcohol-fuelled violence. These are the issues that people are concerned with and concerned with now. They're not sitting around waiting for a proposal to come up with details as to how it's going to improve their lives. We are here to serve Australian citizens of all backgrounds, and it is not right to divide us along the lines of race, especially within our Australian founding document. So I am very, very pleased that my colleagues have sat down and listened to and gone through a process and heard both sides. And what we've heard from those who are in support of the voice is that they wish to see it formulated on the previous ATSIC model. If this is the case, I can tell you now, there's no way that we want to support a failed model that went before us already and to see this such model be forced into our constitution. It has to be understood also that despite what's been told to the Australian people, there are Indigenous Australians who do not agree with this, who do not know what this means. Minister Burney might be able to take a private jet out into a remote community dripping with Gucci and tell people in the dirt what's good for them, but they are in the dark, and they have been in the dark. And the very reason why I chose to fight to become a senator for the Northern Territory was to make sure that people like that were understood also. And that is why we have, in our nation's history, for the first time, 11 Indigenous Australians representing not just Indigenous Australians, but all Australians within Parliament. This concept that has no detail undermines those voices that have worked hard to be elected into the Australian Parliament. The reason why Indigenous Australians face the demise that they have, I'm talking about marginalised Indigenous Australians, because just because you're Indigenous does not automatically make you marginalised. But for those who are marginalised, it doesn't mean that, there is no evidence whatsoever that this particular voice to Parliament is at all going to support these individuals. It doesn't mean that just because you are Indigenous you are automatically marginalised, as this suggests. It also doesn't mean that you agree with this concept. And we have to stop dividing our nation along the lines of race and recognise our contribution to this nation, from the first people of this country to the migrant people who have come here and made this their home, to those with convict backgrounds. We have come together to create one of the world's greatest nations, and we should start celebrating this fact. Yes, there is goodwill. There is immense goodwill for Indigenous Australians in this country, and the 1967 referendum demonstrated that loud and clear. So did the walk across the bridge. That demonstrated that loud and clear. The fact that every single day Australians are making acknowledgements to country, acknowledgements to traditional owners, every single day tells us loud and clear that Indigenous Australians are recognised. So what we need now is practical measures, not an idea that lacks complete and utter detail, that's based on emotional blackmail. And I'm telling you now, it is not racist to disagree with a proposal that's been put forward to the Australian people that lacks detail, that divides us along the lines of race. I do not buy into that narrative. I would suggest that that sort of narrative is coercive control. It's a way to push people into feeling guilt for our nation's history when we should be celebrating who we are as Australians, because only then can we actually achieve anything real for our marginalised. As I said, it doesn't automatically make you marginalised to be an Indigenous Australian, but we do have a hell of a lot of marginalised Australians, and those people are largely out of sight, out of mind. Those people do not speak English as a first language, and those people still live very much along the lines of traditional culture. They are who we should be focused on. Unfortunately, this voice model is about empowering the elites. It's about a transfer of power and nothing more than that. So I thank my colleagues that are here to back me up today, and I know that we'll be going forward treating each and every Australian equally as we do.